Welcome to Act 3, the podcast where we explore how to thoughtfully shape the rest of our lives. I'm your host, Cara Gray. This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching service where I help executives and professionals plan their Act 3. For more information, stay tuned until the end. Today, I welcome Jenni Antonicic to the podcast. In her words, after 20 years in the wine business, she changed to a career in wellness and is sort of retired. Now she teaches yoga and meditation. She has never outgrown the childlike delight in sharing what she loves and finds meaningful with others. Helping people feel their wholesome best and helping them take the next step towards their heart's desire is what motivates her now. Healthy, happy people cause less harm. And so this is her way of trying to alleviate suffering in the world. That is a mission, Jenni. So full disclosure, I know Jenni in real life, so this conversation might be slightly more casual than some of them that I'm having. I have taken many of Jenni's classes, both in the studio in downtown Chicago. She teaches yoga at a fantastic place called Tejas, where they offer classes both online and in the studio. And I've also gone on a couple of her retreats, which have been rejuvenating, renewing, and amazing for me. So it's my pleasure to chat with her today because she does have a story of, leaving one kind of high stress, crazy world and going to one that's a much happier place and much, just more. Well, I'll let her tell it. How about that? I can stop talking. So I like to talk about journeys on this podcast. That's what it's been, journeys from a place of working in a crazy world to not. So let's start with your life in the wine business. What did your schedule look like? What did your life look like? How were your hours? Tell me all about it.
Um, well, thank you for having me on your show for the first place. But yeah, I would say first of all that my career in the wine business was fantastic. Honestly, I I loved what I was doing. It was exciting. It was interesting. It was a lot of sharing with people. Um, It was a lot of work. It was grueling physical work. I will say it's the grueling physical work of the wine business that brought me to yoga in the first place because my body was just losing functionality.
Yeah.
I needed yoga just for like I'm telling you, just for barely raising myself up to a bar of normal functionality for a human being. I couldn't very well walk up and down stairs, for example. Right.
Wow.
And I was in my mid-30s at that point, so
Wow. Yeah, that's a
I
problem.
really needed yoga bad.
So
I
was your job doing more of like the sales side or promotions?
for most of the time, I was in a retail store.
Okay.
I was in the most exciting retail store in the world. I was in Sam's Wines and Spirits,
I
which
remember
unfortunately
Sam's.
has,
Yeah.
gone out of business. But, it was genuinely, like, the most exciting venue that you could be in for wine, in the United States. It was massive, it was huge, it was a destination for wine lovers, whether they were producers or salespeople, or of course, people that just drink wine. Um, I can, yeah, I don't want to go into it too much, but it was extremely exciting. I did then spend a few years on the sales side. There's a certain point at which people say, "Well, retail, what's next? What can you do next? What can you do next?" And for me, it was moving on to the wholesale side. And so I worked for an importer for almost 3 years. And it was during that time that I started noticing what my female colleagues, especially, who were about 10 years older than me, say, um, what their lives were like and what their health was like. And I started realizing I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in it in the long run. The wine business itself changed a lot. It went from a very personal business to being sort of a much bigger commodity numbers game, for example.
Mm.
Um, and so in a different few different fields, things were changing, and I took the jump to say, okay, I need something new, and I want it to be something that's more wholesome, and I want it something that's going to let me continue for decades to really feel good in my body, to have, you know, decent health, if not vibrant health.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and so I made the change, and I value my wine business experience, and working at Sam's Wines and Spirits was like a dream job in many ways. Um, but at the same time, I feel like what I'm doing now, I very much could take with me to the grave, right? Just like it's something that will change as I grow older in some ways, but I expect it to ride it all the way to the end.
Awesome. Were there parts of, like, your identity that you had of all those years in the wine business? Do you see those
Oh.
transfer for you, or did you have to let go of anything?
For the most part, it was letting go. For the most
Mhm.
part, it was letting go. Being in the wine business is a tremendous milieu of hospitality, which involves drinking wine. Right? um,
I
I
remember being shocked to even realize that you did drink wine because I was like, "This woman is so, like, aligned with the
yeah.
universe and the spirits
Uh,
that."
yeah. So it just it coincided in a little ways with me. I also moved. I had been in the city of Chicago for a lot of years, and then I moved out into the suburbs to be with the person who's now my husband. And so a lot of sort of friendship habits and community that I had where I had been living sort of fell away as I was falling in love and establishing a new life with my husband. And eventually, letting go of the deep immersion in the wine business. It's sort of two streams went against each other at the same time that kind of worked out to where, like, yeah, I lost that identity. Um, when you're not completely immersed in one thing any longer, when you're not continually researching it and talking it and networking with it, it's not the word that I would have used at the time, but that's the word they would use now is networking with it. When that stuff drops away, there's all these layers that are lifted off of you. And I will say there's a little bit of grief with that for sure.
Mhm.
It used to be I was a specialist in Italian wine. So it used to be that I could go into almost any store or any restaurant in the city and look at that wine list and just know everything that was on it, and often had tasted it, or at least had tasted it a year ago or something like that. And then, to realize some years down the road, I can walk into a restaurant and look at that wine list and not really know anything. I mean, I know the basics, right? I know the basics, but that intimacy with certain products and certain people, you know,
Yeah.
has gone. Like, I used to also be able to tell you who sold those wines. Like, okay,
Right?
that's made by those people. It tastes like this, and it was sold by this person to that person, and then finally, here. And I would have known all that, and then that is gone. That is completely gone. The shifting landscape, has shifted while I wasn't even standing on it. And
Yeah.
to try to put a step back on, you're just, it's gone
Yeah, but letting go is important at that stage,
for
and
sure.
having that ability to let go is something that one can cultivate. So you spoke a little bit about your body in your 30s needing yoga, and that's how you found it. Tell us a little bit more about that journey to finding yoga and then realizing it's something you wanted to pursue as a teacher.
Okay. Well, yeah, I started, this is a very common story, I think. I started in my gym, in my local gym, taking a couple group classes. I've often said I really wish there was some kind of video. At this time people didn't have cell phones and smartphones and things, but I wish there was some kind of video or even a photograph of me and that first downward facing dog. Because I'm telling you, I was a wreck. And but something about the way I would feel. I can't remember exactly the things that we did on those classes, but I can remember completely the way that I would feel when I would leave the class and walk home. And that's just immense sense of well-being, right? Of just sort of like balanced, of having put some energy out and it having been meaningful, and then at the same time, not being completely depleted, right?
Yeah.
There's just something, honestly, now with the perspective that I have, I would say, if you spend an hour paying attention to your body and your breath, it almost doesn't matter what you're doing. um, that that quality of attention, especially if it can be not extremely judgmental. I probably was pretty judgmental in those beginning stages, because I would have been like, "You want me to do what? You want
Yeah.
me to put my right foot where?" It doesn't go, right? It just doesn't go. So like, let that go. I know I had those experiences, but what I really remember was walking out of class and just feeling so well. And so it was probably for a few years that it was just a matter of going to group classes and walking away and feeling really well. And it feeling so well that it was com- a complete enticement to go back for more. Right? It's like just complete enticement to go back for more. Um,
Do you
but
remember
I
at Oh, sorry. Do you
oh,
remember at
go ahead.
what point, you were like, "I need to learn more. I need more knowledge in this. I wanna learn this. I wanna teach this to others."
Um, it's my personality to dive deeply into really whatever catches my attention. So, for me, some of that stuff starts right away. Like as soon as I'm like, oh, I really like this. I want to do it more. But I can't say that I was necessarily studying it, wasn't reading it, I didn't have friends that were doing yoga necessarily. It wasn't
Yeah.
yoga and then go for coffee and talk about the class or something. I didn't really have that.
Yeah.
Um, um, so I was just literally practicing the physical and the breath stuff more and more. And I had two what we call a yoga moment that really stand out in the early period of this. A yoga moment is when you're sort of overcome in the middle of practice. And maybe you're crying or maybe you're laughing. But there's some like just complete overwhelm experience that comes with some insight, right? So like you're done with it and you're like, oh my gosh, I know what to do now. So we call that a yoga moment. The first one, I was in the very beginning of a practice, and the teacher read a quotation from Sean Korn, who's a very well known yoga teacher in the vinyasa world. And the quotation was, if you're being inauthentic, it's exhausting. But if you're expressing your true self, it's effortless. And I had been on the wholesale side of the wine business, and it was a big challenge to me. It was a big, knocking on doors. Hi, will you try my wine? Very different than, being at the hub of the wine universe and people coming to me. Um, It was very challenging, to me, and I honestly didn't feel completely authentic in what I was doing. So when I heard those words, we were in child's pose, maybe, head down, very down, restful posture. I started crying. I started crying and I couldn't stop crying. And I cried for at least half of the class. So, like, there's a point where I'm in downward facing dog. I have my butt up in the air, my head down, and snot is, and just it's running up my face, right? Because I'm upside down. Just tears and snot running into my hair. I wasn't loud, I wasn't disruptive, but I cried for half of the class. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing the wrong thing with my life right now. It
Wow.
wasn't my husband. He was the good stuff. It wasn't that. That it was it
Mhm.
was it was my, the change in my vocation. And but there was no good way to turn back and go back to what I was doing before exactly. So it was like, okay, I got to figure this out and find another way to work with this. And
Wow.
then
Yeah.
same teacher, not the same day, but the same class, same teacher. Some maybe short time later, at the beginning of class, she held up a little postcard notice and she said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to be hosting a yoga teacher training here at the gym." And I was like, "Oh my God." And uh, there was no longer a question.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was gonna be or what it would I'm not even sure that I was locked onto the teacher training part of it. Um, More so like, "Oh, I can dive deeper into there's more than just a class? Oh, I am into that." It was just like, I'm going into that. Um, and I don't even remember in those at the beginning what I thought about teaching. I know I assumed I would.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason I assumed I would is because I remember a moment where I started to doubt myself. Partway through the training, I thought to myself, how would I ever put this into my life? I, you know, I have to work a full-time job. I had gone back into retail at that point, kind of a drudgery job that I didn't really enjoy, but yeah, I have to do something. I have
Yeah.
to pay the bills. Um, and so I thought, well, how can I possibly make this work? And then by the end of the training again, I was back to where like I can't wait to to share this with other people. The transformation that I experienced in my first yoga training was so profound that I couldn't imagine keeping it to myself.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know, did that answer the question? It's a
It
long
does. And that
it's
type
a
of
long answer.
authenticity, that type of like realness and feeling aligned does really attract clients for you, for example. So, I mean, that was a natural thing where you didn't have to go back into selling or figure out how to make it work. Like that was, you're very, very strongly being called to do that, which is so cool. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like, well, it's just the classes that I go to are mostly older people and mostly gentle. I know you work on a wide range, but I think of you as being particularly resonant with that demographic. And I also remember going to one of your classes and a woman there, we were talking about like why we come. I don't even know how the subject came up, but she was like, I come to yoga because when I'm 80 years old, I need to be able to get off the toilet. And I was like, that is plenty of reason and reason enough. Of course, it gives you a lot of other things, but this idea of aging and continuing to stay mobile is not a joke. And your health as you get older is something that needs to be paid attention to. And it's part of the work that I do with my clients now. I mean, there has to be a plan to take care of your health. I am interested in general thoughts about taking care of yourself as you're getting older. And you also have this wonderful concept of continually learning where you talk about if you don't, like your circle gets smaller. It's one of my favorite talks that you've ever done. It was on a retreat that I went to. And it was about, yeah, like if you don't keep expanding, your world gets smaller. And that's really a rough way to age.
Yeah. Um, that that concept, I want to give some credit here. That's Pema Chodron. She's a
Mm,
Buddhist meditation teacher, and I can't remember where I came across this. It was a video somewhere where she uses a whiteboard and she draws these circles, and there's the center and a second ring, and then a third ring, and um It is true. I am probably a little bit more interested in students who are at least in their 40s, but most of my students are, if not in their late 50s, in their 60s, and their 70s, and I
Mhm.
do have students in their 80s.
Yeah.
Um, I like working with this group because I feel like people have got some life experience behind them, and they're starting to recognize that things matter. And they're whether it's, the motivation to be able to get up and down off the toilet, or the motivation to stay in your own home
Yep.
all the way to the end, or just the I don't know, I feel like there's a quality of concentration that people can bring to their practice. They're able to pay attention. Um, Not to say it's easy. It's challenging for everyone to kind of stay collected. We're really fragmented and so on. Really disjointed in some ways. But I feel like people, if they're into their 40s at least, and then on and on, they've got a little bit staying power, to work with a practice, or to understand that that the work that they do maybe in a 1 hour yoga class makes a difference in their relationships, makes a difference if they're still working, in their ability to complete a project, or their ability to creatively come up with a new solution. That there's a tie in. It's not just an hour of fun play with lights and music and cool clothes, right? It just so I do
That's
tend to
fine.
work with more mature students for sure. This teaching, is something that is true really in all stages of our lives, but you might just think of the law of inertia, right?
Yeah.
Isaac Newton, right? It's like
Yeah. Body in motion stays in motion.
motion stays in motion, and until something works against it, and a body at rest stays at rest until something moves against it. And the longer we stay at rest, or the smaller we become, the more difficult it is to turn around and go outwards again. And so, generally, this is very natural, right? It's not like you're a bad person for doing this. This is just like how we're kind of set up to be. We organize our lives to get them easier and easier and easier, right? So more efficient, better appliances, right? Um,
Yes.
softer softer sheets and bath towels, the things in the home that we like to smell, the surfaces that we like to touch. We organize our lives. I'm just using a home here, but the same is true for our relationships. We avoid people that rub us the wrong way. We don't go to restaurants where we don't like the food. Of course, right? Do you see what I'm saying? But we just
Yeah.
in all ways, if we're not deliberately turning outwards and reaching outwards, then we are turning inwards. And so this is not just a physical experience, but it's very much a mental experience, and it's an emotional experience as well. But the less that we do, the smaller we become. Right? The less that we do, the less able we are to do it. Things as simple as always leaning on the table with the hands and pushing into the hands to stand up. This seems so innocent, of course. But then there's a point where if there's no table there, right, we can't simply lean forward and press into the feet and stand up. So, I mean, I guess I see this all as coming together. The more that we're continuing to stimulate ourselves, the more that we're willing to move, the more likely it is that we can go on another vacation and walk up that hill to get the sunrise, right? Or we
Yeah.
can, the more able we are to say, "Oh, park the car here. I can walk," to the wherever it is. But the opposite is true. The more we use the valet parking, or the more we rely on someone else to carry our bags, or the more that. Someone else puts the groceries in the car for us. These are little ways in our lives that add up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've answered the question or not, but you get the
Yeah.
idea. It's like we have our comfort zone. That's the little ring in the middle is the comfort zone, and then we've got a ring of challenge. And now, then we also have a ring of overwhelm.
Yes.
So we don't want to get into the overwhelm, not as a all the time, right? Maybe every now and then you chip a little toe out in the overwhelm just to
Yeah.
know, oh, there are dragons out there. But we want to continually expand our comfort zone. Want the comfort zone to get bigger, not smaller.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. I think it's just really important as we age. Is something that I think we need to be mindful of, and not everybody is. So that's why I'm glad I had you share that.
One more thing, I know that
Yeah.
you're working particularly with like people who are anticipating their retirement, or maybe they've just
Just
retired.
yeah.
There's something really marvelous about the human brain, which is called neuroplasticity, which means that it's changeable. And it's one way that we have the capacity to always learn. Like it might be that an old dog can't learn new tricks, but a human person can learn new tricks always, always. And there's times in the life where we're more neuroplastic than other times. A big time, of course, is those first 2 years of life, and really the first 6 years of life. But then it happens again as we're adolescents, and it happens again when you fall in love. And if you end up having children, it happens at the birth of a child. So these moments where the brain is like automatically set up to be really changeable. And this is so that of course you'll stop being your old, selfish person and take care of the baby, right? You stop being your old selfish person and you can be in a relationship with another person, or you can learn how to be a person in the first place. So when you're retiring, this is a massive transition time. It's as or even changing careers, of course, as was the case with me. And but
Yeah. Would you say is that
everything
also a time
changes.
of this neuroplasticity when you're
Yeah,
switching,
yeah. And to say
something's changing?
you're always capable of making changes. Always capable of making changes. But you're just to say that it's a special moment. It's like you're on a step ladder, right? When there's a big change, if you move to a new town, if you start a new job, if you're going to retire. So any big change is a really fantastic opportunity to be intentional about how you want things to go and what experiences you want to draw to yourself.
Yeah.
So it's very worth people's time to kind of pause and say, how do I want to be? And what are the things I can put in my life to make sure that I stay that way?
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, I definitely have people in my life who went past that retirement, ticker tape, and they just skidded into the lazy boy chair and they watch TV.
Yeah. No.
And I have a
I know.
partner
I don't want
who's
that to happen to people. That's why.
65,
Yeah.
and if something drops on the floor, she can't get it because she can't go down, and she knows she can't get back up, and she's 65.
Oh,
She's had no injuries. There's no
that's
disease. She just hasn't done it in so long
yeah.
that she can't do it anymore. And
Wow.
so I just this is a magic moment. We every moment is magic. Obviously, every moment is magic. But this is like such a great opportunity to say, okay, what can I do to have great sleep? What can I do to really um, nourish myself? What can I do to fill my life with exciting experiences that stimulate me? How can I interact more with more and more interesting people? How can
Yeah.
I find challenges? How can I find challenges that are appropriate, that are not overwhelming, but that keep me, going outwards, that keep me turning outwards?
Perfect. You
Yeah.
can do my job, Jenny.
Oh,
No, I
yeah.
love it. I mean, I do look at it, retirement is not an end. I look at it as a beginning and a way to really explore all kinds of things that you just haven't had time or
Right,
capacity
right,
to do
right.
in your life. So this all
Mhm.
plays really well. The other thing that was notable when you were talking earlier was about, your experience when you first went to yoga was not about community, but I would say the group that you have, I call them Jenny groupies. That's why I told your husband when I first met him, I said, I'm a Jenny groupie. You are very much cultivating community. And that is another thing that is important because you have to find oftentimes a new community when you retire. So I find a yoga studio a great place for that as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Y-
It is. First of all, I push it.
Yeah.
My languaging. I reference the community. I reference the support that we give to each other as we're practicing,
Yep.
or we practice supporting each other, so we can go out into the world and support each other.
Yep.
Um, But yeah, I have a Monday morning class, for example, with mostly retirees. And after class, they almost always go out for coffee afterwards. Like the whole class, like they all get in the elevator, they all go together. And there's two or three different places that they go in the neighborhood. Um, but that sense of community, I think especially the sense of community around people who have at least a smidgen of interest in a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because we can also
Like
get
minded
community. We can get
people.
community at the pub, on the corner. Which
Yeah.
community is great. So where you're genuinely finding community, I support that. But I think yoga can be, for sure it was for me, what we might call like a king stone. Is that the right word? A keystone habit
Mm.
change,
Like a
right?
pillar.
It's like, you put your finger in this spot and then it spreads all over the globe. That kind of a thing. So for
Okay.
example, um you want to feel good in your yoga practice and you want to feel strong. You want your body to feel good. So you're careful about what you eat or drink the night before. So you're starting to make a little thing there. You
Mm.
know that you need to be well hydrated. So you have some water before and you make sure you get water afterwards, the rest of the day after a practice. Um, there is sometimes a little bit of shaming. This isn't great, but I think it can serve a good end. There's a little bit of shaming. I mean, in a yoga studio, um, you don't find a lot of people talking about chicken and waffles and where they can get the best shots at happy hour. You
Right.
tend to have people chatting about, oh, this new place opened and they have super healthy lunches. This place opened and it's a great place to go if you're not going to drink, like whatever it is. um People tend to make a friend that they're going to go out and they're going to take a walk with later
Mhm.
in the week.
Yep.
So I find that like a yoga studio, of course gyms do this as well, fitness studios do this as well, but a lot of yoga studios, they support community in a different way. And I would guess that part of it is there's a conceptual framework that's underneath yoga. It's not just a group of postures that you do or some way of moving in the body, but there's some philosophy underneath it as well.
Mhm.
And just to like touch one little note here, one of those elements of the philosophy is that you're not isolated. You're not alone. You are connected very, very deeply, extremely fundamentally, essentially connected to all other beings. And so, if this is the belief and this is the understanding, at least of owners of a studio or principal teachers of a studio, then the community that forms is just a natural outgrowth of that. Sometimes gyms are a little more compartmentalized and they tend to separate mind and body, or they
Yeah.
separate heart and body. And they tend to feed the ego in a way that accentuates that sense of isolation.
Yeah.
that sense of comparing. Am I as strong as them or am I not as strong as them? Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that, or
Yeah.
there's sort of a judging quality that leads us into feeling separate,
Yeah.
which then leads us into feeling happy. But
Yeah.
the yoga studios push community in a certain way. Push is probably a hard word, but it's supported. It's supported because there's an underlying understanding that we're in this together.
Yeah.
And that what we do has meaning because it's incredibly impactful for the rest of the world, really.
Yeah, no, for sure. So speaking of which, I am going to put a link to Tejas Yoga where people can find you and take your classes. And then I'll also put a link to your website because depending upon when this podcast is released, Jenny has various retreats and meditation courses and other interesting things going on constantly. So you can get on her mailing list, I think, by going to her website. So I'll
It's
put all those details in the show notes. And Jenny, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom. I feel more calm already. And I need to come to class soon, so I will.
uh, You're welcome anytime. You're welcome anytime. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure to talk to you as always. And yeah, just congratulations on the work that you're doing because the way that we spend the last sort of portion of our life is so impactful. This is really where we sometimes turn around and are at our very best. You know, so
It's certainly
yeah.
possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching firm. I help executives and professionals plan the non-financial part of their retirement, like how to discover new purpose and how you want to spend your time. I offer a one-on-one coaching retirement blueprint package where we work together to discover some new avenues of exploration for your Act 3. This coaching is completely custom and will provide you with a ton of resources and support as you transition to this new stage of life. For all the details, please go to goodmorningfreedom.com/services.